Recording in progress.
A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, and welcome to Indonesia PPP Day. It is a great pleasure to welcome you all to Indonesia Pavilion World Expo Dubai. I'm Timothy Marbun, and I will be taking the privilege of accompanying you in this event today. First of all, I would like to give a warm welcome to our honorable guests, His Excellency Yunis Al-Khoury, the Undersecretary of Ministry of Finance of United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Luki Al-Firman, Director General of Budget Financing and Risk Management from Indonesian Ministry of Finance, His Excellency Heri Trisaputra Zuna, Directorate General of Infrastructure Financing for Public Works and Housing from Indonesian Ministry of Public Works and Housing, Mr. Anang Latif, President Director of the Telecommunications and Information Accessibility Agency from the Indonesian Ministry of Communication and Information of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Bramantio Isdijoso, Director of Government Support and Infrastructure Financing Management from Indonesian Ministry of Finance, Mr. Taufik Budi Santoso, Assistant for Economic and Development of West Java Provincial Government, Ms. Satu Kahkonen, World Bank Country Director for Indonesia and Timor-Leste, Mr. Richard Lebars, Charge d'Affaires Canadian Embassy for the Republic of Indonesia, prominent invitee, and all distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, our event is also accessible in Bahasa Indonesia and sign language. You can choose that option by clicking the interpreter feature on your screen. Parts of our whole event today is conducted remotely, and all the crew members involved have gone through a COVID-19 screening to ensure our safety. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, Indonesia PPP Day is an annual event that has been held since 2016 by the Ministry of Finance of the Republic of Indonesia. The objective is to engage with private sectors, financiers, and the public to deliver the message about Indonesia's commitment to pursue sustainable development and investments. As we know, Indonesia will hold the presidency of the G20 Forum in 2022, and infrastructure will become an agenda. Infrastructure is a catalyst to promote higher and inclusive economic growth. This certainly needs to be supported by the adoption of environmental and social aspects in infrastructure development, given the global target towards climate change issue. This matter is in line with Indonesia PPP Day's theme, enhancing government support for green PPP in Indonesia. This is towards climate resilient investment. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our event will be held in 2 days, which will be going on from today, March the 28th, and also tomorrow on March the 29th, 2022. And this will be held in the Dubai World Expo Forum. There will be a plenary session and business forum, which will be held on the day one or today, and a project showcase, which will be held on our second day, which is tomorrow. Now, the plenary session will be a high-level interministerial dialogue event where the panelists are participating online from Indonesia and hold an interactive dialogue led by a moderator from Dubai. Now, the business forum, this is a Q&A session with a group of participants led by the moderator. This helps us explore more on the roles and strategies of financiers. Now, to participate in sustainable infrastructure development. Now, the last agenda is a project showcase. Now, this session will explore how to prepare green, sustainable, and affordable PPP projects in housing, water, and airport sector infrastructure. Now, it becomes our great expectation that throughout this event, a lot of practical knowledge can be used to determine policies related to investment in Indonesia. Now, ladies and gentlemen, as we move on, we will have opening remarks from Directorate General of Budget Financing and Risk Management, delivered by Director of Government Support and Infrastructure Financing Management from the Indonesian Ministry of Finance, Mr. Bramantio Isdijoso. Mr. Bramantio, the time is yours.
Thank you. Honorable Ambassador of Indonesia for Uni Emirat Arab, His Excellency Hussein Bakis, Canadian Charge d'Affaires to Republic Indonesia, Mr. Richard Lebars, Undersecretary of the Ministry of Finance of UAE, Mr. Yunis Al-Khoury, Director General of Budget Financing and Risk Management, Mr. Luki Al-Firman, Director General of Infrastructure Financing for Public Works and Public Housing, Mr. Heri Trisaputasuna, Director of Telecommunications and Information Access Agency, Mr. Ahmad Latif, Assistant Economic Development of West Java Government, Mr. Taufik Budi Santoso, World Bank Country Director for Indonesia, Ms. Satu Kakonen, and our honorable guests. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, salam kebajikan. May peace be upon us all. Good morning to all of you. This is very exciting day for all of us to be able to convene here in Dubai after a while because the pandemic situation, and I wish all good health and conditions. It is a pleasure and highest honor for me to give a special remarks in this long-awaited event, the Indonesian PPP Day 2021, to discuss the latest issue for Indonesia infrastructure development, particularly on the space of public-private partnership or PPP. We are thankful for your kind attendance today in this very special event. I would like also express my gratitude to all partners and potential partners for your continued support for Indonesian development. Especially today, we are carrying out the Indonesian PPP Day from Dubai since we believe that Indonesia could strengthen the partnership with investors from Middle East area. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, the Indonesian PPP Day event is a flagship annual event on the public-private dialogue, especially in Indonesia infrastructure development. The Indonesia Ministry of Finance organized this kind of event to engage with the private sector, financiers, and the public to deliver a brief about Indonesia infrastructure schemes and policy, particularly the public-private partnership scheme. Whereas over the above that, we also aim to raise the global market appetite for infrastructure investment prospect in Indonesia. Today we gather here to hold the 4th Indonesian PPP Day by Indonesia Ministry of Finance. The previous event had been successfully held in Singapore with the term Beyond Boundaries Indonesia as Global PPP Investment Destination, to signal our ambition to capture the global infrastructure market attention. We consistently maintain this annual event as a commitment of the Indonesian government to strengthen relations and respect with the international investor. We believe that investors from Middle East countries, in particular from UAE investors, have a great potential, and we look forward to welcoming them. This year's Indonesian PPP Day theme is enhancing government support for green PPP in Indonesia toward climate resilience investment. We choose this theme considering growing importance of environment and social risk and its impact on infrastructure. We also note an increasing appetite of international investors who consider sustainability, more specific in environmental and social aspects on their investment decisions. We decided to arrange this event in Dubai World Expo 2020, which is a global event that links innovation, technology, art, and culture to offer a great experience to the world. So it is our hope that Indonesian PPP Day 2021 could take a significant part and provide substantial contribution to this international event. On that matter, the government of Indonesia has a strong commitment to address climate change issue and challenge, especially in infrastructure agenda and its expected objective from implementing the ESG framework in Indonesia. Our commitment is implemented among others in Indonesia term proposal in Indonesia G20 presidency this year. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, we are very privileged today that we can listen directly from representative of Minister of Finance, Ministry of Information and Communication Technology, Ministry of Public Works and Housing. Furthermore, we have invited one of our considered most promising regional partner in the PPP project, the provincial government of West Java. We will discuss four main topics, which are: first, embracing sustainable and resilient infrastructure development through the implementation of the ESG principle. Second, enhancing inclusivity and resilient infrastructure development through digital infrastructure. Third, addressing the new perspective in infrastructure development through ESG. And the last, adopting green and inclusive principle in local infrastructure investment. This discussion welcomes all the audience questions, concerns, and thoughts, particularly those that often arise from investors regarding PPP transaction and implementation of ESG. We believe that the panelists can provide answer and assure to address the question and concern from the investor perspective. Following our main session in the business forum, will be discuss the role of sovereign guarantee as assistance to ensure ESG principle implementation in the project development staging. Additionally, we will also discuss how blended finance can promote sustainable and resilient infrastructure development. The discussion will cover both perspectives from the Indonesian and also the UAE government. Finally, we will also present our SDG Indonesian One works as blended finance platform in Indonesia. The next day, we will provide you another business forum to present the implementation of ESG aspect in our ongoing PPP projects. Our special mission vehicle, we showcase their approach and preparing, structuring, and bankable project according to the ESG principle, while aligning with the market appetite from the housing, water, and transportation project sector. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this event will not be possible without generous support of the Canadian government and the facilitation of the World Bank Group. We would like also to thank the Ministry of Finance of the UAE, the Embassy of the Indonesia in Uni Emirat Arab, the Consulate General of the Republic of Indonesia in Dubai for supporting this event. The participation of fellow Indonesia stakeholders also humbles us. Hopefully, we will be able to draw mutual lessons for the further coordination back home. Again, we wish a beneficial discussion among us in the coming session. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Mr. Bramantio, thank you very much. And also please deliver our warm welcome as well to His Excellency Husin Bagif, Ambassador of Indonesia to the United Arab Emirates, who joins us today. Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us today. Moving on, the next speech will be attended by the World Bank Country Director for Indonesia and Timor-Leste, Ms. Satu Kakkonen. Ms. Satu, time is yours.
Your Excellencies, Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Minister of Finance, Pak Basuki Hadi Muljono, Minister of Public Works and Housing, Pak Johnny Plate, Minister of Communication and Information Technology, Pak Ridwan Kamil, Governor of West Java, Mr. Richard Lepars, Acting Ambassador of Canada to Indonesia, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the World Bank, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Indonesia Public-Private Partnership Day. Let me also acknowledge the generous support of Canada for this event. The past 2 years have been challenging as the pandemic has continued to cause health, economic, and social crises across the globe, including in Indonesia. I commend the extraordinary efforts of the government of Indonesia in successfully coordinating health resources and social assistance across the country to respond to the pandemic. Indonesia's economy has weathered the crisis better than many other economies in the world, thanks to Indonesia's prudent macroeconomic management. Now the focus is shifting to supporting economic recovery and addressing the climate change. Climate change is the defining challenge of our times. By 2030, Indonesia aims to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 29%, or by 41% if international support is available. Indonesia also seeks to achieve net zero emissions by 2060 or sooner, and is preparing for the energy sector transition. Like elsewhere in the world, Indonesia's transition to low carbon will rely on active involvement of the private sector. Government in Indonesia or in any other countries cannot do the transition successfully alone. It will take everyone's effort: the government, the private sector, the civil society, and development partners. I'm pleased to recognize government's efforts to improve institutions, policies, and processes to facilitate public-private partnerships and private investments. Between 2016 and 2021, there was a notable increase in private investments in Indonesia, with over 23 projects, especially public-private partnerships, reaching financial closure to the tune of $13.25 billion. Indonesia's efforts to support private investment include mechanisms to address viability gaps, de-risking of projects, a project development facility to prepare public-private partnerships, and options to introduce private investments in government-owned assets through asset recycling, and the creation of a sovereign wealth fund. Indonesia has also issued the world's first green sukuk under the Green Bond and Green Sukuk framework. So a lot has been done. But while important steps have been taken, a lot more still needs to be done. Reforms are needed to harmonize the regulatory regime to accelerate climate-smart development. Indonesia plans to mainstream environmental, social, and governance standards in infrastructure and create incentives for clean development and sustainable energy transition. This is very welcome. Going forward, it would be important also to scale up private and international investments through innovative and blended financing mechanisms to develop green infrastructure and to manage fiscal risks in the transition. And that also includes addressing the role and governance of state-owned enterprises. The Indonesia Public-Private Partnership Day brings investors together for Indonesia's infrastructure to promote sustainable, green, and inclusive development through public-private partnerships. The World Bank is committed to supporting Indonesia in its climate action as well as in its development goals. We do that in many ways. Let me mention three. First, the World Bank is supporting Indonesia's geothermal energy initiative with the de-risking facility. Second, we are preparing support for modernization of ports in eastern Indonesia and collaborating to improve urban mobility through mass transit. And thirdly, we are working with the government on the new carbon pricing and trading framework, on the asset recycling program, as well as acceleration of introduction of renewable energy. These efforts will pave the way for significant opportunities for private investments going forward. The Public-Private Partnership Day will raise awareness of new investment opportunities in Indonesia. But today is also an opportunity to discuss how to support Indonesia to scale up the delivery of clean, inclusive, and sustainable infrastructure through private capital and innovative financing. Let me conclude by thanking all of you for joining us. I look forward to active and successful discussion to transform ideas into action. Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih, Ms. Satu Kakonen. Ladies and gentlemen, the next speech will be delivered by Charge d'Affaires of the Canadian Embassy for the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Richard Lebars. Mr. Lebars, the time is yours.
Thank you very much. Her Excellency Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati, Minister of Finance for Indonesia, His Excellency Bapak Jani Jahal Plate, Minister of Communication and Information Technology, His Excellency Bapak Basuki Hadi Muljono, Minister of Public Works and Public Housing, His Excellency Sheikh Maktoum bin Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, Minister of Finance of the United Arab Emirates or Representative, Her Excellency Satu Kakonen, the World Bank Country Director for Indonesia, Bapak Ridwan Kamil, Governor of West Java, Bapak Luki Al-Firman, Director General of Budget Financing and Risk Management, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor for Canada to support Indonesia's Ministry of Finance to hold this event through the Indonesia Infrastructure Finance Development Program, a collaboration between Indonesia, Canada, and the World Bank. First, I would like to applaud Indonesia's achievements in advancing its development agenda by its commitment and efforts to close the infrastructure gap, particularly during this challenging time of the COVID-19 pandemic. Over the recent years, including these last 2 years of the COVID-19 pandemic, Indonesia has been active in building more public infrastructure, ensuring that more roads, airports, seaports, power grids, water treatment facility, and other infrastructure were built for its people across the archipelago. We have seen more and more of these infrastructure developed using the public-private partnership scheme. This demonstrates the increasing capacity of the government of Indonesia and the improved enabling environment to attract more private sector to participate in long-term infrastructure projects. Nevertheless, we know that Indonesia is still facing challenges in meeting its enormous infrastructure demand due to the development disparity between regions and the ongoing impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic has made it difficult for countries around the world to manage our budget. We have all shared experience in seeing significant increases in spending for health, social assistance, and incentives to stimulate our national economies. Meanwhile, revenues remain stagnant and have even declined for some countries, hence widening our budget deficit. Despite these difficulties, Indonesia has done remarkably well managing its budget deficit over the last 2 years of the pandemic from a 6.14% deficit in 2020 down to 4.65% in 2021. At this rate, I'm confident that the Ministry of Finance will be able to bring Indonesia's budget deficit back to its pre-COVID-19 pandemic level, which is under 3% as targeted by 2023. At the same time, we are facing more adversities and challenges coming from the impacts of climate change. To overcome these challenges, governments from around the world, including Canada and Indonesia, have been committed and have actively taken measures to help mitigate the impacts of climate change on our environment, and most importantly, to our people and their livelihoods. And I'm pleased to see that the objectives of this year's PPP Day is not only about attracting private sector involvement to meet infrastructure demands, but also to have more infrastructure that are sustainable and that incorporates environment, social, and governance principles. This challenging and yet exciting environment underscores the importance of today's PPP Day event, as there is a strong urgency and need to have more participation and financing from private sector, particularly international key players with their funding and knowledge to support Indonesia to accelerate and advance its sustainable infrastructure development. The presence of three ministers, namely the Minister of Finance, Minister of Public Works and Housing, and Minister of Communication and Information Technology, as well as the Governor of West Java, is a testimony to how serious and committed the government of Indonesia is in promoting public-private partnership to build hard and soft infrastructure, not only at the center, but also throughout the regions. Through Canada's support in this IIFD program, we have been sharing some of our good practices with our Indonesian counterparts, led by the Ministry of Finance, on how we utilize the PPP scheme to meet our infrastructure needs through Indonesia's regular participation in the annual conference held by the Canadian Council for Public-Private Partnerships. In addition, as evidence of the strong relationship between the two countries in infrastructure, we are pleased to see that two of Canada's largest pension funds, the Canada Pension Plan Investment Board, or CPPIB, and the Caisse de dépôt et placement du Québec, or CDPQ, in recent years enter into partnership with local and international companies to invest and finance Indonesia's PPP projects. I believe this is just the start of our collaboration, and we hope to see many more Canadian infrastructure stakeholders share their experience and expertise with our Indonesian friends, especially in the areas of green and sustainable infrastructure projects. In Canada, since the start of the PP scheme in 1990, there have been over 220 public infrastructure projects in various sectors, including transport, education, and health, that have been financed and built using PPP. These projects have generated significant economic benefits to us, including employment creation, increased tax revenue, and improved economic outputs. There are several key determinants of Canada's success in using PPP to build our infrastructure. First, high-level political will across all levels of government is essential. In Canada's experience, the initiative to use PPP schemes was not only led by the federal government alone, but the provincial governments were also a driving force behind the rollout of successful PPP projects in their own jurisdiction. Therefore, it is very encouraging to see the presence of Governor Ridwan Kamil from West Java today to show that the provincial government is very much on board and committed to using PPP schemes for their local infrastructure projects. Second, a strong and stable pipeline of projects has been crucial in securing contract prices and high quality bids. With a strong pipeline of PPP projects, prospective operators could better allocate their resources. The public sector also benefits from the stable base of PPP expertise that is established. Third, an efficient procurement system. Of the mature PPP markets around the world, Canada is acknowledged to have one of the most efficient procurement processes. Overall, the median procurement time over the whole process prior to the pandemic was approximately 16 months. Consequently, bid costs in Canada are lower than in comparable markets, such as Australia and UK, attracting more companies to put competitive bids. Lastly, a diverse market for project finance. Government purchasers at the provincial level have ensured that project documents and their key terms are consistent across all projects in an asset class. This has been a key advantage to ensure that projects can obtain the ratings required for bond financing and stimulate healthy competition between different sources of debt. I also would like to share how Canada realized their commitment to build sustainable and resilient infrastructure that resonate with the theme of this event and the direction that Indonesia is going, by having more infrastructure that is sustainable, green, and inclusive, that support achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals. Through our Investing in Canada plan, launched in 2016, the Government of Canada is investing over 180 billion Canadian dollars over 12 years for infrastructure that create long-term economic growth to build a stronger middle class, support the resilience of communities, and transition to a clean growth economy. and build social inclusion and socioeconomic outcomes for all Canadians. These translated into public transit projects, green infrastructure, social infrastructure, trade and transportation routes, and infrastructure projects for Canada's rural and northern communities. I hope that we can share some of these experiences with you through this event and our ongoing program. This event is even more important in what it can achieve as Indonesia is holding the presidency of G20 this year. We support and appreciate your commitments to make G20 a successful and meaningful event for its members, and Canada is looking forward to working with you in the G20 Infrastructure Working Group as we share these common goals for our people. Seeing how prepared and committed the Ministry of Finance is in leading and coordinating this event, I am confident that you will have a beneficial and meaningful discussions and engagement over the next 2 days. With that, I wish you all the success and look forward to engaging with you in the upcoming G20 discussions. Thank you. Merci. Terima kasih banyak.
Thank you very much, Mr. Labars, for your remarks. Moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, we have an opening remarks by the Undersecretary of Ministry of Finance from the United Arab Emirates, His Excellency Yunus Al Khoury, live from Dubai. Please welcome His Excellency.
Thank you, thank you. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome to Dubai Expo 2020, home for 192 country pavilions that came together under the theme of opportunity, mobility, and sustainability. I would like to start by thanking the government of Indonesia and the PPP unit and the Ministry of Finance for hosting us today in this landmark pavilion, symbolizing diversity, innovation, and opportunity. I'm delighted to host ministers, virtual, international investors, PPP-related stakeholders, and a wide representations from the Indonesian government. We are all gathered today to explore potential collaboration for future of infrastructure financing and economic development. Today's agenda focuses on the importance of private investment in infrastructure to accelerate the green and sustainable transition, which helps bridging infrastructure investment. Attracting investors to infrastructure projects is a global priority that is currently being mainstreamed through the G20 efforts and advancing the agenda of quality infrastructure and promoting infrastructure as an asset class. To that end, we understand and support the Indonesian G20 presidency in prioritizing scaling up sustainable infrastructure investment by leveraging private sector participation to fill the existing financing gap and develop a more resilient and sustainable infrastructure sector. This will benefit both the public and private sectors, as it brings social, economic, and cultural benefits, which helps governments create a better future for younger generations. Promoting the quality of infrastructure projects also plays a vital role in attracting more private investors. It enables economical growth by maximizing the economic impact of infrastructure and creating a virtuous circle of economic activities stemming from infrastructure. Both Indonesia and the UAE have made significant progress in advancing quality and sustainable infrastructure objectives. For example, Indonesia's pioneering achievements of being the first government to issue a green sukuk in March 2018 and setting national determined contributions since 2016 to reduce carbon emission by 26% for 29 in 2030, and increase the target to a 41% reduction with international standards. The UAE mobilized private sector expertise and international capital toward long-term partnerships on significant infrastructure projects, such as Abu Dhabi Masdar City, which stands out as a testament to the UAE ambition effort to develop sustainable carbon infrastructure. The UAE has also launched the Dubai 2040 Urban Master Plan and the UAE Green Agenda 2015-2030, and has recently started implementing the UAE Circular Economy Strategy 2021-2031. One of the key priority sectors is green infrastructure, which was identified as a key pillar of the UAE circular economy. We noted that Indonesia is finalizing the carbon pricing regulation law and began implementing blended finance schemes to optimize infrastructure financing schemes and green infrastructure needs. This is supported by the SDG Indonesia 1, established by the government of Indonesia in 2018 to manage philanthropist pooled funds to support the blended finance scheme. We are looking forward to hearing more about those initiatives and drawing lessons. And where possible, we would like to use this opportunity to exchange practices and explore areas of collaboration. Finally, I would like to say that COVID-19 was a wake-up call as it fast-tracked the need for resilient infrastructure and called for the urgent need to fill the investment gap. We gather here today, thanks to Indonesia again, to explore ways for attracting more private investors toward green and climate resilient infrastructure investments, which can be achieved without private sector participation. By doing so, we will be ensuring government preparedness and responsiveness in the face of future disasters and risk emerging from climate change issues. Therefore, we see great opportunities and of importance in today's meeting as it allows us to learn and explore innovative PPP finance models and the needed tools to issue the transition to net zero and critical infrastructure assets. I look forward to these discussions and more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency Yunis Al-Khoury, for delivering your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, before we move on to the main agenda for today's event, we have Her Excellency Ibu Sri Mulyani Indrawati to deliver her keynote speech. Without further ado, please welcome Her Excellency Sri Mulyani Indrawati.
Honorable Minister of Public Work and Housing of Indonesia, Bapak Basuki Hadi Mulyono, Governor of West Java, Mr. Ridwan Kamil, Director of Telecommunication and Information Access Agency, Mr. Anang Ahmad Latif, Canada Charge d'Affaires of the Republic of Indonesia, Mr. Richard Libars, World Bank Country Director, Ms. Satu Kahkonen, Undersecretary of the Ministry of Finance of United Arab Emirates, Mr. Yunis Haji Al-Khoury, and honorable guests. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, I would like to convey our highest appreciation to the government of UAE, who has arranged the Dubai World Expo 2020, where Indonesia can participate along with other countries. We are delighted to exhibit Indonesia cultural heritage and also our vision and current development through the performance and business forum aligned with our objective. That is, creating the future from Indonesia to the world. We believe that the event has provided us with an effective platform to build a shared version of strengthened cooperation and economic relation between Indonesia and the UAE. I would also like to express my gratitude to all partners and potential partners for your continued support for Indonesia infrastructure development. Especially today, we are holding the Indonesia Public-Private Partnership or PPP Days from Dubai, since we believe that Indonesia could continue to strengthen the partnership with investors from the Middle East area. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, we all know that the impact of COVID-19 pandemic is very extraordinary and fundamentally changed a lot of economic activity. We also see after 2.5 years of COVID pandemic, we strive to recover not only from the health, but also especially on the economic era. Although we currently also see the new wave of Omicron variable in the beginning of 2020, but we are able to relatively now manage the consequence. Despite the increasing COVID-19 pandemic due to the Omicron, the economic recovery from several countries has already continued accelerated. Indonesia, among a few countries, has already achieved pre-pandemic level. The trend of increasing commodity prices, which is now currently happening, due to both recovery as well as the geopolitical situation, has already creating a pressure on inflation. In Indonesia, we are still continue able to manage the inflation rate at a relatively low level. In response to the economic impact of the pandemic, the government of Indonesia, along with many other governments worldwide, have deploying our policy, especially on the fiscal side, monetary and macroprudential, including financial sector policy. The situation which is currently facing by many advanced countries in the form of very high inflation, for example, like the United States, Europe, has forced them to adopt a much tighter monetary policy. This, in consequence, is going to create a lot of complication on the recovery process for many countries in the world. Indonesia continue working hard to navigate all these challenging tasks as well as environment, whether coming from the COVID itself, as well as from the geopolitical and the environment of the policy, which is more tightened. The government continue pursuing the economic recovery program in 2022, which we allocate 455.6 trillion for continue boosting our recovery. The strong intervention have helped creating job in economy and also reducing poverty and prevented many of others' family falling into poverty. Indonesia economic performance in the fourth quarter of 2021 gained 5.02% growth. And overall for 2021, our growth was 3.69%. The strong growth also creating job as well as reducing poverty. Our global manufacturing activity also has already recovered very strong to 58.6% in February, although currently a little bit modest. Moody's, in this case, providing us with a credit rating with a growth projection at the level of Baa2 stable. The economic growth for this year will be projected between 4.5% to 5.2%. We are currently also continue consolidating our fiscal side with the recovery of the economy. 2021 is very critical, but we have to make sure that this recovery process will be supported by fundamental reform. We will continue making sure that handling of the pandemic will be continued consistently until we can transform into endemic. And at the same time, the economic growth will be pursued through both demand side as well as supply side through more rigorous reform in Indonesia. The focus of our reform, that is on economic recovery and structural reform, is mainly to address the issue of quality of human capital as well as on the infrastructure development, and also transforming the economy into a more productive and higher value added. As an emerging country, Indonesia continue pursuing our goal of the development, not only through our own resources. We invite more investors to come to Indonesia. And that's why we also reforming doing business and investment climate through the Omnibus Law on job creation. This Omnibus Law has fundamentally changed the way the Indonesia manage our economic policy, simplifying procedure for investment, and also providing a much clearer as well as simple doing business in Indonesia. On the fiscal side, the government also enacted two very important reforms, that is the harmonization of tax regulation, which is not only reforming our income tax, value-added tax, as well as the general provision, but most importantly also align well with the trend of the global taxation. The second one, we also reform our fiscal side through the relationship between central and regional government fiscal transfer, making sure that the benefit of the government spending will be enjoyed by the people through a better spending and improvement of the local government taxation. These are all the reforms that Indonesia adopted even during the pandemic situation. We also at the same time established a new vehicle for attracting investors, that is by establishing sovereign wealth fund for the first time. We call it the Indonesia Investment Authority, which is creating a platform for all of you to be able to invest in Indonesia through equity financing and partnering with us to create development, value added, and prosperity for all. Ladies and gentlemen, our INA is already now inviting many of the investors. Our first stage investment target is in the transportation infrastructure sector. This is the transportation which is very important for the connection of Indonesia as the big country in which connectivity is becoming very important. We also invested in toll road, seaport, airport, and also on the communication. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the government of Indonesia today also continue transforming our economy. We are now also trying to adopt a policy which is aligned well with the global concern that is on climate change. Indonesia ratified the Paris Agreement on a nationally determined contribution, that is our determination to reduce the CO2 so that we will continue growing, but at the same time also reducing the global emission of the carbon. Indonesia, in our agreement, or in this case, national determined contribution, has put it openly that we will decrease 29% with our own capacity and 41% with the international support by 2030. Our main priority to decrease the greenhouse gas emission is through forestry sector, which contributing most of the carbon reduction, and also on the energy and transportation. They both cover 97% of the total emission from Indonesia. Despite the huge cost of developing renewable energy, we also see that Indonesia continue determined to transform our energy toward more renewable. Indonesia also targeted to achieve net zero emission in 2060 or earlier. In order to achieve all those very ambitious development targets, there are four innovative policy which is set out by our government in order to provide support on a climate change agenda through our fiscal framework. We are now developing climate change fiscal framework that will identify the demand as well as the supply of funding for climate change. Another policy agenda which is very important in Indonesia is the adoption of carbon price and introducing carbon market. This is in order for us to be able to implement the polluters pay principle and applies in every activity or business. This carbon pricing consists of trade and non-trade instrument. On trade instrument that include emission trading system or ETS and offset emission or crediting mechanism. On the non-trade instrument, we also introduce taxes or levies over carbons, that is carbon tax, and also introducing the result-based payment. Our energy transition mechanism policy has been designed in order for us to be able to phase out coal to more introducing renewable energy. This is a very ambitious target because we have to make sure that this transition will be affordable as well as just. We also, in this case, as a country which is in a ring of fire, we have frequent natural disaster. And that's why the government of Indonesia also creating disaster pooling fund in order for us to be able to continue able to respond when natural disaster, whether this is in the form of earthquake or any based natural disasters, which is becoming more frequent with the climate change. The government of Indonesia, in this case, also using our fiscal tool in order for us to be able to address the issue of climate change through incentive, for example, like tax holiday, tax allowance, and value-added tax facility. Ladies and gentlemen, for all of us facing with this challenge of climate change, and certainly we have to not only think hard, but also working hard in order for us to be able to continue developing and building a good infrastructure, because quality of infrastructure needed for a country like Indonesia to be able to continue pursue our goals. Indonesia needs a lot of sustainable infrastructure development currently and in the future to boost our productivity. Investment on the infrastructure are still facing with a resource constraint. The IMF has highlighted that concerted effort by those with fiscal space, along with smaller contribution by others, can increase the level of real global GDP by close to 2% by 2025. That means infrastructure is a strategic investment, but certainly we have to overcome where the resources should come from in order for us to be able to continue addressing this issue in a more sustainable way. Financing infrastructure, in this case, is becoming very important and priority, especially when all countries in the world facing with the fiscal constraint post-pandemic. Mobilizing private financing for sustainable infrastructure is becoming very critical to unlock the financial sources to develop sustainable infrastructure. Government of Indonesia continue fully aware about the importance of this private sector role on the infrastructure development. So we increase investor awareness as well as adopting the quality standard, which is now already becoming the golden standard globally, that is ESG, quality of infrastructure and investment decision. Our ESG framework implementation focus on the area of first, committing of the owner of the project to contribute to the carbon reduction, and second, the application of gender aspect for inclusivity, and the third, on the application of technology in the preparation, transaction, and project operation processes. Intensive dialogue now has been done by the government, including through today's forum, in which public and private investors will continue to discuss as well as understanding and also familiarizing with the opportunity to invest in Indonesia infrastructure. At the same time, with our role as a presidency of the G20, we continue also putting the infrastructure development and financing as one of the most important agenda. This is not only to achieve sustainable development goals, but at the same time, we are taking care of this world, the earth, which needs a lot of us to taking care so that it will sustainable. Ladies and gentlemen, the government of Indonesia has already established many financing instruments in order for us to be able to attract more private investment. And we understand the value for money is very, very important for all of you. So one of our invention is creating Sustainable Development Goals Indonesia 1, a platform which is creating a blended finance platform between the government as well as all other parties for green project in collaboration with various actors or stakeholders, philanthropic institutions, donors, bilateral as well as multilateral, and climate finance institution together with the government of Indonesia will invest in the project which is green and also consistent with sustainable development goals. One of example which is very, very important, for example, geothermal facility and the subsidiary loan agreement that we've already used in order for us to be able to invest in this renewable energy. Indonesia also has a scheme to accommodate collaboration with private sector on infrastructure provision through public-private partnership scheme. The PPP framework that is already introduced long time ago, 2005, has already mobilized private sector investment in the infrastructure in Indonesia. Our feature of PPP is actually more developed, in which we gain a better services and efficiency through project life cycle, and also at the same time supporting the achievement of sustainable development goal through the participation of private sector in a more efficient, accountable, and transparent way. The Ministry of Finance of Indonesia has also created special mission vehicle or SMVs as a catalyst and enhancer to bring flexibility for private sector investment with different appetite of risk to be able to participate on the infrastructure development in Indonesia. Our IIGF and PTSMI as a special mission vehicle have supported infrastructure development and financing from the preparation of project, government guarantee, and also financing through the SDG Indonesia 1 as a blended finance platform. As of December 2021, we have 28 public-private partnership projects with a total investment of $17 billion. Those projects are mostly in the toll road, drinking water, and ICT sector. Ladies and gentlemen, honorable guests, we are all agreed that infrastructure has the potential to contribute to the stronger economic recovery, especially post-pandemic. At the same time, this needs to be designed in order to be consistent with our concern of climate change challenge. The environmental, social, and governance aspect of infrastructure development will thus need to be continued put as an important principle of infrastructure development. Economic recovery should not creating, or in this case, at the cost of environmental. There is a way for all of us to be able to better balance between our economic goals and social as well as environmental goals. These are all possible, and these are all even more critical with the working together between government as well as private sector. International commitment to provide access to affordable financing and technology are also very critical in order for all countries, including emerging countries like Indonesia, to be able to achieve our commitment on the climate change, but at the same time continue pursuing our development process and development goal. A principle of just and affordable transition need to be implemented in order for all countries, both developed country and least developed country, to be able to participate in a cooperative and harmonized way. The current challenge in this case on a sustainable response of Indonesia is actually to be able to continue implement this principle of just and affordability. And this is why we need to continue working very hard. I would like to express my appreciation to the UAE and the Middle East that is continue creating a forum for like this in order for all of us to be able to continue not only having a discussion, but pursuing a very serious interest in order for us to be able to continue developing while at the same time we are taking care of the environmental and social concern. In closing, I would like to again express my appreciation to all participants who today attending this infrastructure investment and public-private partnership forum. All your participation is really important, not only for the goals of Indonesia, that is the development to create prosperity as well as a just economic growth, but also for pursuing the global goals of achieving prosperity and reducing poverty. Thank you so much and have a very productive meeting.
Thank you very much, Her Excellency Sri Mulyani Indrawati, for delivering the keynote speech for our event today. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the main agenda of Indonesia PPP Day, the plenary session. Now, this session will carry the theme Quality Infrastructure Investment for Sustainable and Inclusive Growth. Now, sitting in are the panelists are from the Ministry of Finance, represented by Mr. Luki Alfirman, from the Ministry of Public Works and Housing, represented by Mr. Heri Trisaputra Zuna. Ministry of Communication and Information Technology will be represented by Mr. Anang Latif. And last but not least, West Java Provincial Government, Mr. Taufik Budi Santoso. Now, without further ado, we will be connected to Dubai with Anjana Sankar as the moderator. Anjana Sankar is a senior journalist based in the United Arab Emirates who has covered the Yemen war, the Rohingya refugee crisis in Bangladesh, the Syrian refugee crisis in Europe, and other international stories from the front lines. Now, currently, Anjana is the assistant editor at Khaleej Times. Anjana writes about global stories of conflict, migration, and natural disasters. To lead the discussion, we go straight to Dubai. I leave it to you, Anjana.
Very good morning to everyone. It's an honor to have this session. We already listened to some key speakers from Indonesia and across the world talking about the goals and vision that Indonesia has in terms of addressing the infrastructure development issues, but keeping in mind the social and environmental concerns very much. So I would like to welcome the honorable guests here, Dr. Al-Khoury and Ambassador and all other distinguished guests here, and our respected panelists, some of them joining us virtually, and also Mr. Luki. Pleasure to have you here. You know, we are still living through a pandemic. Pandemic is still not behind us. And one of the big questions that most of the governments would ask is, how would they address the question of policies, framing policies for economic recovery, but at the same time maintaining their macroeconomic stability from the increased inflation pressures. Indonesia is a country which has fairly been very successful in handling the COVID situation in their country, and also maintaining and managing the impact of the pandemic which has had on world economies without having to sacrifice their medium term financial and fiscal stability. And Indonesia is very much on the spotlight because this is a country that is going to take the G20 presidency in 2022 as we speak. And infrastructure development, as we listen to the panelist members, is a key issue for Indonesia. A lot of focus there. Infrastructure is, I understand, is a catalyst for promoting inclusive and higher economic growth for every country, and so is for Indonesia. But it is very important that, since countries are addressing how to have climate change mitigating actions, so that is a very serious concern, and you cannot do that at the cost of degrading the environmental and social concerns. So today we have very key members from the Indonesia government, and I think this could be one of the very important conversations that we will have as a few days left for Expo 2022, to fall, curtains to fall on this mega event. So I will start with you, Mr. Luque Al-Firman. If you could just give us an overview of what are the key objectives of the PPP Day that we have here, especially that we are hosting it at Expo 2020, which has sustainability as one of its core subjects.
Thank you, Anjana. First of all, very good morning from Dubai to all of you. Very good afternoon for those of you in Jakarta. His Excellency, Ambassador Husin Bakis, Bapak Husin Bakis, His Excellency, Mr. Al-Khoury from Undersecretary of the Ministry of Finance of UAE, ladies and gentlemen. We have heard from the statement or keynote speech from Minister Sri Mulyani. I think I would like to perhaps to address your question. I would like to highlight or to emphasize again what Mr. Sri Mulyani has shared with us before. We know due to the pandemic COVID-19, almost all government in the world had to adjust, had to recalibrate their economic development path as well as target. And of course, we are very blessed that if you look at the pandemic now has been much better managed. Number of cases have been declining. And now I think we can shift our focus on how to recover our economy. But we need to remain vigilant with the possible outbreak coming from, let's say, new variant. And for Indonesia, Indonesia is the largest archipelago in the world. And so connectivity is the key for us to foster economic growth. That is, we're talking about economic growth that is inclusive as well as equal. So that's the challenge for us. And for us, infrastructure is still our big homework. And I'm talking not only about traditional infrastructure like road, airport, or even electricity, but we're also talking about like IT, digital infrastructure. And of course, we know as well that infrastructure it creates one of the highest spillover effect to the economy. Especially in terms of job creation, in terms of business opportunities. So that's why with that, Government of Indonesia's strategy is to use this infrastructure development to jumpstart the economy as a plan, as a part of our plan, of our economic recovery plan from pandemic. And with huge financing needs, we know that for sure government cannot bear all the costs. So of course, so that's why the solution is how to attract, how to invite private sectors to participate to support our infrastructure development agenda. And that's why, as Bu Menteri mentioned, we have seriously been developing this PPP scheme to invite the participation of private sector in recent years. And as Bu Menteri shared with us, I think so far the trend is quite encouraging. So far, there are 29 projects have reached what's called financial close. 13 of them already in operation, and the total value almost $17 billion. And we have 20 more projects are still in work in progress. What I'm trying to say, PPP scheme in Indonesia really works. So now our challenge, our job is to even further push this PPP scheme as the alternative solution for our infrastructure development agenda. And as you mentioned, of course, on the other hand, we are very concerned about these climate change issues. Government of Indonesia has been very, is very serious, is very committed to address this, to combating this climate change issue. And Bumantri also mentioned about our commitment. For example, we have ratified this Paris Agreement in 2016, and we have submitted our NDC, kind of our commitment to reduce this greenhouse gas emission 39% by our own effort and 41% with international support by 2030. It's huge, or is quite ambitious. So now how we combine those two. So going forward, our strategy is not just to merely building infrastructure projects. Rather, how at the same time we also promote this infrastructure that is more sustainable, resilient, as well as inclusive. So that's kind of the tagline we are using. And we also this year we are hosting and holding the presidency of G20. And on this G20 forum, this is very in line with this G20, in which one of the objectives is how to promote, how to leverage private sectors to sustainable development goals, while considering at the same time the transition need for developing countries. So this is very, very challenging task. And so that's why, Mr. Finance, today we are initiating this today event at Dubai World Expo. We can have dialogue, we can have discussion with our investor, our potential investor, especially from Middle East area, in which we can discuss, we can show to you about our commitment, our plan toward this infrastructure development that is, as I said, inclusive, sustainable, as well as resilient.
Thank you, Dr. Luki. We heard your Minister of Finance talking about, as you said, how significant it is to have private-public partnership to achieve these goals. And as you rightly mentioned, it's a balancing act where you have to address your economic challenges, but not compromising the environmental issues that you have to address. But while Indonesia speaks about these commitments towards sustainable development goals, could you elaborate a little bit more on what are your new approaches while implementing infrastructure development policies, while addressing climate change issues, especially when you have a plan for a robust infrastructure development?
First of all, we know that this climate change has become this global concern, right? And it needs kind of concerted collaborative effort to address this, especially for Indonesia, because Indonesia is very prone to the impact of this climate change. So that's why it's very important for Indonesia to really participate in addressing this climate change issue. And what we need is a concrete, real action to address this issue. So as I said, that we have submitted our commitment to achieve this NDC. And as I said, it's not that easy. This is quite ambitious. It needs concerted as well as continued effort from all parties, not only domestic, internally in Indonesia, but also kind of together globally.
Yeah, if I may pitch in and ask you, when you are attracting private investments into infrastructure development, how do you ensure that it aligns with the larger goals of sustainability development of Indonesia? What is that approach?
Okay, first of all, that we need to convince people, including investor, hey, this is our plan, right? So, for example, to achieve this NDC, so we have to formulate kind of the roadmap, the concrete plan, how to achieve that. And in our calculation, it turns out it's not that cheap. So Bu Menteri mentioned about, for example, in our calculation, we have developed or we have formulated the form, the detail of the plan. And in our calculation, for example, 97% coming from what's called FOLU, forestry and other land use, as well as transportation and energy. So Pareto, with the Pareto approach, we know that if we are able to address those three sectors, so we are able to address already 97%. And in our calculation, it needs large funding. So almost in our calculation from to 2030, we might need around 250 billion US dollars to achieve this NDC. Right? So as I said, that government cannot bear all the costs. So I think that's where private sectors, we're talking about this, including philanthropies, multilateral development partners, some green fund, and those things, right? To also to support us in achieving those goals. And in our case, in our side, Indonesia also has undertaken some reforms, some important initiative. Bu Menteri mentioned, for example, like, look, we have already what's so-called climate change fiscal framework. There's kind of concrete support from government. And we also have worked very hard on how to formulate what's so-called carbon pricing, carbon market, in fact, carbon tax as well. And we also have launched what's so-called this new initiative called Energy Transition Mechanism, or ETM. It was launched in COP26 in Glasgow last year. And because again, Indonesia is very prone to disaster, including natural disaster, we also have initiated what's so-called disaster pooling fund. So just to show you some concrete initiatives, some concrete programs and projects to address those issues. And in the context of PPP, so we also will encourage those projects, those PPP projects that are in line with these climate change issues. So that's why we have our SMV, special mission vehicles, like PTSMI, like IIGF. And going forward, we're not talking about just traditional infrastructure project, but for example, we need to address at the same time those climate change issues. We're talking in particular green projects. So Bu Menteri mentioned that this year, hopefully, we will launch the new initiative in which, hopefully, with this what's so-called ESG framework, all government support, all government facilities provided for PPP project should comply with what's so-called these ESG principles. And for Indonesia, for developing countries like Indonesia, is a breakthrough, because we know very often the case is by applying this ESG principle, it might add cost. At the same time, also might take longer time to complete project, even starting from the preparation, execution, and later on monitoring, for example. But that's kind of our part of commitment. And last but not least, we also, government of Indonesia has been working very hard in finding new instrument, new innovation. So 2018, we issued for the first time our Global Green Sukuk. And this is the first ever of its kind at that time, because look, this is green, and Sukuk, this Islamic bond with green element, or green bond with this Sukuk format, right? And we know in terms of investor, for example, those are kind of different types of investors at that time. But that's one of our innovation, try to combine those two different kind of features, right? Having this global green sukuk. And I think the response was very positive, was very encouraging. And since then, we've been issuing this global green sukuk every year. Total right now is already 3.5 billion US dollar we issue this green sukuk. And we move even further. Last year, we issued what's so-called the new SDG bond. So global green sukuk, this is green and sukuk. Now we're talking about SDG bond, SDG, but in this conventional format. So in terms of portfolio management, we have now more complete kind of portfolio.
We'll come back to you more on the policy decisions that you have taken. But we have Mr. Heri Turasaputra Suna, who's joining us from Jakarta. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, Andriana. Good morning, Faliki.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining us from Jakarta, sir. You are the Director General of Infrastructure Financing for Public Works and Public Housing, a very important department that will drive these infrastructure development policies forward and aligning it with the sustainability development goals of Indonesia. So my question to you is, we listen to your ministers and other officials talking about how Indonesia is taking that strategy forward. But from your experience, if you could just elaborate a little bit on, how do you take the infrastructure development forward in Indonesia and realize these commitments of Indonesia?
Yeah, thank you, Anjana. Yeah, of course. Yeah, we are in the Ministry of Public Works. Yeah, in terms of the infrastructure, we have at least 4 sectors. Yeah, 4 sectors, which is road and toll road, and then the second one is water resources and settlement infrastructure, including water and sanitation. And yeah, the last one is the housing. Yeah, in terms of the development, the toll road and road is already moving forward. We have so many projects already going on. The river well, yeah, well the and also for non-toll road, we now preparing the 4th project with the PPP, which is the availability payment. And based on this experience, we developed the same approach for the water as well. Yeah, the water now we start with the 2 projects already delivered, and the next one we also continue. But what we understand from our experience that we need to a little bit improve the delivery itself. Yeah, we understand that the PPP is the tools that must be undertaken to deliver all the infrastructure. The PPP as a platform here, but the approach itself should be much modified. Yeah, say for example for the water, in order to achieve the SDG target number 6, yeah, 100% of access water, we need to understand that the project should be delivered from the upstream to downstream. Yeah, currently we do with unbundling concept, for example. For the future, we need to do it as a one action plan, regardless, which is maybe not in the same package, but we need to deliver it as a one program. Yeah, in order to create a sustainable, resilient, and water project. And regarding the environment and social governance principle, we understand that we need also to adapt the process now to allow that all of the public work infrastructure project can also be counted as in the reduction of carbon emission. Yeah, for the 3 project, water, drinking water, and sanitation, as well as housing, I believe it is already in line with the ESG. But for the toll road and road, this is also another homework that we need to improve in the next future. Thank you, Jana.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for your response. And coming back to you, Dr. Luki, Indonesia is known as one of the biggest archipelagos where you have various provincial governments, and they are responsible. They have enough authorities to take forward their development planning. So could you just elaborate on, what are the support or policy support that Ministry of Finance offer these provincial governments to make sure that when they implement development policies, that it is aligned with the sustainability development commitment of Indonesia?
Thank you, Anjana. So, Indonesia is a big country. We have 34 provinces and 514 municipalities and cities. And for us, for Indonesia, when we're talking about inequalities, we're talking about not only about inequalities among income groups, but also inequality among regions. That's kind of the big challenge for us. So when we're talking about public services, public good, we know most of them should be provided by local government, by subnational government. So we're talking about basic needs. We're talking about quite standardized needs, actually. However, we know that those local governments have different capacity. So our challenge here is how to really help also just to ensure that all Indonesian people anywhere, right, have access for those adequate basic needs as well as public goods and services. And it came this pandemic, COVID-19. And the impact also, unfortunately, also quite different for different regions. So the thing is, if you look at, again, the impact on poverty, the impact on inequalities, almost all regions have, have to experience this kind of the worsening poverty rate, the worsening inequality, but at different level. Different provinces, different regions have different impact. So my point here, with the pandemic, the challenge is even bigger. Not only just to address those, this public service, these public goods, but also, hey, because of pandemic, how we recover from this pandemic as well. So this is where also central government also need to step in, okay? And that's why, again, in line with our topic today, to use infrastructure development as to jumpstart the economic recovery. And that's why those government facilities under PPP scheme also need to be enjoyed, should be enjoyed also by those local governments. So that's why we encourage, for example, our SMVs, we have PT SMI, we have this PTPII, our IGF. They also need now to go further to local government, to subnational government. And we also provide facilities, as I mentioned before. We know in terms of capacity, we have to admit those local government might have different capacities, even low capacity, I would say. That's why this is where government or national government need to step in by providing like project preparation. We have this what's called PDF, project development facilities. We're talking about guarantee provided by IIGF. We're talking about credit enhancement, those things, those facilities. And again, with the SMVs, they need to work hand in hand on the field, right, with this local government. And today we have a representative from West Java province. This is one of the quite, I would say, progressive province. So we now, for just one showcase, we've been working together with the West Java province for project waste to energy, waste to Nangka. So this is where we together, national government through our SMV providing some assistance in terms of capacity as well as in terms of financing. For example, we provide guarantee, we provide this PDF for this project, as well as coming directly from budget from Ministry of Public Work. And even more interestingly, this is the concrete example of blended finance, because at the same time for this project, we also got project loan from the World Bank. So this is very good concrete example or showcase. It's still work in progress, and we really hope that this kind of model can be or should be replicated to other projects in other provinces or other regions.
Okay, great. I think that's a great example you said for how you promote inclusive growth. I think we rightly have Taufik Budi Santosa, who is the governor of West Java. Welcome, Mr. Taufik. Glad that you could join us from Jakarta. As Dr. Suki said, this is West Java is a good case study of how progressive a provincial government has been and how you worked hand in hand with the local governments. So my question to you is, what are the programs and policies implemented by West Java in order to attract funding from various resources when you have to go ahead with infrastructure development policies? And also, how did your government utilize the facilities provided by the central government to develop local infrastructure? If you could throw some light into that, sir.
Yes, thank you, Anjana. Good morning in Dubai, Pak Luki, Pak Heri, Pak Anang from Jakarta also. Good afternoon. First of all, I would like to mention that it is an honor for me to have a panel discussion in this forum on behalf of my governor, Mr. Ridwan Kamil. So first of all, may I give some brief information about West Java first. So West Java is one of the strategic province in Indonesia, but the most populous province in Indonesia, more than 49 million people in 2021. The workforce in West Java are dominated by productive age, with approximately 75% of its total population. And moreover, West Java has right now, in line with central government, right now the economic growth is positive, 3.74% in recovery period right now. And West Java also right now the #1 destination of foreign investment nationally, and also the #1 exporter, the strategic product in Indonesia. So there are three main keys of attracting investors or private investor in West Java, especially that the first one, infrastructure readiness. So West Java offers the highest connectivity supported by the transportation infrastructure and a short distance of Indonesia capital city. The second one is human resources productivity. So West Java has 37.5 million people of productive age. Also the home of Indonesian top university as the center of excellence. The third one is good service quality. The typical West Java hospitality turned out to be a magnet for investors to come to West Java. So in line with the central government program, like Pak Luki mentioned before, yeah, we are fully supported by the central government doing the PPP project in West Java province. Like Pak Luki mentioned also, that we are supported by PDF project development facilities, and also capacity building, and then also the guarantee And we are right now preparing for at least two projects under assistance from central government, mainly from Ministry of Finance and also Ministry of Home Affairs. The first one is waste to energy, Lekok Nangka. This project will service more than 1,850 tons per day, the waste product from 6 municipal and regency in metropolitan Bandung. And then the second one is the water supply in Jati Gede. Jati Gede is, we call it Greater Cirebon in the northern part of West Java. So this water supply will service more than 1,500 liter per day, per second, I'm sorry, per day, and I'm sorry, that this right now is under assistance from Ministry of Finance and PTSMI for doing the preparation for this project. So the scheme that Ministry of Finance conducted for us is in preparation phase and also in transaction phase until the financial close. So I think this supported from Ministry of Finance can boost the acceleration of the services to the public, especially in waste and also for water supply. And right now also we are promoting to Paluki the third project related with the transportation, especially the rail transportation, also in Bandung metropolitan area.
Thank you very much. We really hope that this inspiring story that you shared with us could be replicated in other provinces, that can follow suit with what West Java has done. Mr. Anand, before I come to you, I have one more question for Dr. Luki. I believe that as our Undersecretary also pointed out, Indonesia and the UAE are strategic partners, and one of the key areas is definitely collaborations on digital technology. So one thing that pandemic has taught all of us is that the digital disruptions that it brought with us is we have to innovate, and implementing digital technology in various whether it's government or private sector is not just a luxury anymore; it is a necessity. So my question to you is, what do you see as the potential of digital technology applications in Indonesia, and what is the role or what are the steps your ministry is taking to accelerate digital technology implementation that can drive the sustainable development goals?
Okay, thank you, Anjana. Digital transformation or digital technology. First, pandemic. I would like to see this pandemic as kind of our wake-up call, actually. So we know because of this pandemic, we have to do, at that time, we don't have, at the beginning of the pandemic, we didn't know about what we are dealing with. So social restriction, social distancing, things like that, we had to do this. I mean, prevention is the key at that time. And then later on, we had vaccination, but so far, we haven't seen yet, for example, medication or cure for this COVID-19. But in the last 2 years, there are important lessons learned that I think we can see also kind of blessing in disguise. It opens new window of opportunity. So this is where actually we, including Indonesia, I mean, almost all countries in the world see the importance of this ICT, information communication technology. Hey, life moves on. We need to live, right, with this restrictive, much more restrictive kind of activities. So going online becomes the trend, the new trend now. So connectivity, again, not only talking about the traditional connectivity project like road or airport or seaport, but we're talking now about this digital infrastructure. We're talking about ICT support here. So that's first. For Indonesia, you can see also from two perspectives, geography and also demography. Geographically speaking, as I mentioned, Indonesia is the largest archipelago in the world. So this is much more challenging. We're talking about Indonesia from west and east and south to the north. And we have to reach those remote areas. And we're talking about this digital infrastructure. So geographically speaking, it makes us even more difficult. It makes us more even challenging. Okay, and again, at the same time, we're talking about addressing these inequalities. And number two, in terms of demographic, Indonesia is very fortunate. We still have what's called demographic bonus. Our population is dominated by, let's say, young generation, millennials, in which the benefit or the advantage is they are much more technology savvy. They are more adaptive to change. They are more willing to adopt with this new technology, these new trends. And this is an opportunity. So how to combine those two, challenges as well as opportunities? So as usual, government, we have different types of, let's say, support. First, of course, coming from our budget. So in terms of direct spending, in terms of, hey, my colleague Pa Anang can share with you, for example, we have some quite, I would say, landmark IT projects, like just before pandemic, we completed what's called Palaparing projects that connecting Indonesia region with this cable. But at this now, we're also developing or trying to develop this new satellite. For example, again, my colleague Pa Anang can also share with you. But that's one example. But on the other hand, the same challenge here, the same problem here, that government cannot bear all the costs. That's where also we need to attract private investor to participate, to support our digital infrastructure development. And I think this digital infrastructure is one of the, I would say, sexy sector. Okay? And at the same time, the technology moves very rapidly. So this is very interesting. Technology moving very rapidly, at the same time quite costly, but try to find the right balance in terms of timing, in terms of the use technology, because when we decide to use this technology, hey, maybe 5 years later, it's already kind of obsolete, right?
It's obsolete.
So this is kind of very challenging. So back to our budget as well. So that's why government not only providing support from what's called direct spending from our budget, but also through what's called below the line from investment. The same thing here, by pushing or by promoting this PPP scheme, by using our SMVs, PTSMI, IIGF, we really pursue or we need to attract private investor, both local investor as well as global investor, to also participate this very potential, I would say, very, very potential sector in Indonesia. So in terms of course, we know investors always look for IRR, look for profit. And again, in terms of potential, I'm talking about 260 million people, population in Indonesia. And as I said, dominated by young generation.
Yeah, but I think the next question naturally goes to Mr. Anang, as you said. You have a young population, digital savvy, but Mr. Anang, I hope you're there, and thank you very much for joining us from Jakarta, and thank you for your patience, coming to you. last but not the least. So the question to you is, when we talk about digital transformation initiatives, but everything boils down to the question of connectivity, access, digital access for people. So could you elaborate a little bit on what are the overarching actions and policies that you have taken to achieve sustainability and also to address the question of digital divide in a vast country like Indonesia? Thank you.
Thank you, Anjana. Good morning, Dubai. Good afternoon, Jakarta. Before answering your question, Anjana, let me say hello to Pak Luki Afirman, thank you, Bapak Heri TZ, and Bapak Muhammad Taufik Budi Santoso. Okay. The Ministry of Communication and Information Technology, or Kominfo in short, plays a double role relating to today's sessions. Firstly, as the key enabler of national digital transformation. This included preparing the regulation and the ecosystem. Secondly, the ministry also plays a role as a provider of infrastructure and services, especially to the people in the less accessible and underserved parts of Indonesia. As for Kominfo role as a provider, we work to bridge the digital divide in the areas left behind by the commercially oriented development. We fully comprehend that it is not possible to rely on the market to bring equitable digital access throughout the country. Almost 20 years after the privatization of telecommunication service, we have still got many underserved locations in terms of internet connectivity. Therefore, the government must step in to close the gap. The government must commit to provide reliable infrastructure without leaving anyone behind. Bhakti, or Indonesian Agency for Telecommunication and Information Accessibility, under the supervision of the Ministry of Kominfo, manages the Universal Service Obligation Fund collected from the telecommunication operators since 2006. Also, in response to the urgent needs for equal digital connectivity, Bhakti is entrusted to utilize the state budget, or APBN, since last year, 2021. Bhakti programs are present in all three layers of national telecommunication infrastructure: backbone, middle mile, and last mile layers. We supply telecommunication infrastructures with various technology, both utilizing terrestrial structure and satellite. We connect cities to districts, sub-districts, and down to the rural communities or villages. Currently, Bhakti is managing projects as follows. Under the backbone layer, we have, as mentioned from Pak Luki Afirman, we have developing projects. The initial one was already completed in 2019 and is now on operation. This project was successfully completed using PPP financing structure. The development was divided into 3 PPP arrangements, PPP agreement: West Palaparing, Central Palaparing, and East Palaparing. We are now starting the extension project of Palaparing called Palaparing Integration Project. This project aims to extend the reach of the current Palaparing, adding more 12,200 kilometers of fiber optic into the networks. The construction is expected to start next year and will be completed in 2024. And will also be financed by PPP structure. This will be our 5th project involving PPP structure. In the middle mile layer, we are expecting the launch of our project Satria-1 satellite, the first ever government-owned satellite of 150 Gbps capacity. This is the 4th project utilizing PPP structure managed by Bhakti Kominfo. The Indonesian government has a target of achieving bandwidth availability of up to 1 terabit per second. In addition to the construction of Satria-1 and the hot backup satellite, Kominfo is preparing 2 satellites, namely the government twin satellite and 1 satellite from foreign manufacturer, each with a capacity of 300 Gbps and 150 Gbps capacity. Thus, it is projected that by 2025, there will be a capacity of 680 Gbps available for the government. In the last mile layer, we build BTS towers and provide internet access or Wi-Fi spots for priority location, public utilities location. Bharti is currently putting up 7,900 BTS towers with 4G technology in Indonesia, adding the existing 1,682 BTS tower. And soon we look forward to the provisioning of 150,000 Wi-Fi spots that will transmit internet connection provided by Satria satellite. This project has started in 2021, and by then as many as 15,556 Wi-Fi spots were built. Now we are working to achieve the remaining target of 150,000 Wi-Fi spots by 2024. Thank you. Let me hand over to Ms. Anjana.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Anand, for giving us an overview of what are the efforts being done to improve connectivity in Indonesia. Now that we've listened to all our panelists virtually and with Dr. Luki present here, I would like to open the floor for questions, if you have any questions, gentlemen. Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Can we have the mic?
Thank you for inviting us today to this very important session. My key question is always, as we are also asked, maybe from the expertise and the experience of the Indonesian delegations that we have today, what will make Indonesia more attractive? Is it the legislative side? Is it the government commitment? What will make it more attractive to the private sector to invest more into the PPP initiative?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to take the question?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, as Bu Menteri has shared with us, and I would like to emphasize her points. First, Indonesia is a big country as well as very potential. We are a developing country. For example, yes, because of pandemic, almost all countries have experienced kind of a bit setback of our economic development. But Indonesia has been able to manage our economy. So, for example, Indonesia is only a few countries that already back in terms of GDP pre-pandemic. So, for example, last year we were growing at a level of 3.6%, 3.7%. So this is kind of very positive compared to our peer countries, for example. And going forward, that we are very committed in our reform, as even during the crisis, during the pandemic, we've been undertaking embarking some bold structural reforms. Like Bu Menteri mentioned about this job creation omnibus law. We're talking about the new tax reform, the new tax law, as well as the new law on relationship between central government and local government. The point here is, even under these very difficult times, that Indonesia government is still committed to undertake this structural reform to improve our economy, to be able to attract investors. And as I said, that's very potential in the sense that, look, 260 million population Indonesia, we are growing. Our middle income group has been growing quite extensively. If you look at Indonesia just being upgraded from what's so-called lower middle income country to upper middle income country. And we are quite optimistic that going forward that we should be able to even graduate to high income country. That's our vision for 2045. And today's context or today's topic on PPP, this is one government effort, concrete effort to how to attract these private investors. We know when we're talking about infrastructure, we're talking about long-term commitment, long-term investment. So how do we attract this private investor? And we know the key ingredient, the key element is we're talking about trust. We're talking about confidence from private investor. That's what we are trying to do. We try to communicate. We try to have dialogue. We try to have discussion to show to you our commitment. And this is very important, concrete action, concrete policies. So we're not just NATO, not action talking only. So we try to show you that it really works. For example, that's why it's very important for us to have tomorrow, we're gonna have session talking about the detailed technical level about the project that we are offering. As I mentioned, PPP scheme Indonesia is really works. So 29 projects has been completed, right, financial close, and there are more and more projects still in progress now. We have introduced the new modalities. We call it INA, this sovereign wealth fund basically. Thank you also. We have very good support, participation from UAE government as well as investors. So this is just to show you how we try to reach out, how to convince, how to ensure that private investors, including global investors, are really looking at Indonesia as very potential place to invest.
Thank you, Dr. Luki. I hope he answered your question where, I think the name of the game is to keep your country investor friendly and business friendly so that, investments will...
Oh yeah, one more thing that today's topic also we're talking about this sustainable development. So not only about developing just infrastructure project, but we would like to have something that is sustainable as well as inclusive. That's very, very important.
Okay, fantastic. Because we are running short of time, I would love to invite each of the panelists, starting with Mr. Anand, to give your closing remark on importance of PPP and what are your key takeaways? If you could limit it to 1 minute, I would really appreciate it.
Thank you.
For all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you. The government of Indonesia will continue to deploy both upstream ICT infrastructure through fiber optic backbone network, microwave link, high throughput satellite, base transceiver station, and downstream ICT infrastructure through cloud computing technology. This aligns with one of the current G20 agenda, digital transformation, which will affect the economic, financial, trade, education, health, and public sector. As the leader of Digital Economy Working Group and the leading sector of all digital transformation related issue across working and engagement groups, the Ministry of Kominfo will orchestrate all the processes to achieve the overarching goal, recover together, recover stronger. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take please? Mr. Harry?
Thank you, Anjana. Yeah, Ministry of Public Work, still will continue to develop its infrastructure, including the economic infrastructure, as well as the basic infrastructure. In this concern, PPP as a platform, we still continue to develop, to deliver all of the project. In this case, we invite all of the investors to invest in Indonesia. Please understand that the market is very big, this is big demand, and we do our effort to be your good partner here to invest in Indonesia. Thank you.
Mr. Taufik, I welcome you to deliver your closing remarks, please.
Thank you, Anjana. So West Java government have strong commitment, including policy and programs to promote sustainable development, environmental and social consideration in infrastructure development, included the PPP. For funding collaboration, West Java has the financing source of infrastructure development is carried out with various types of financing scheme, such as PPP, like we discussed it today, loan and grant, municipal bond. We are initiating the sukuk in regional level, regional state budget and local state-owned enterprises budget, corporate social responsibility, and community funding. So like Pak Lupi mentioned before, that central government already had a regulation regarding fiscal arrangement, especially for infrastructure development project. And there are several support from central government to local government, provincial, either a municipality and regency, that can be utilized to enhance attractiveness of the project. Thank you, Anjana.
Yeah, thank you. Dr. Luki, before you give your closing remark, if you could answer a question that we received online. Are there any major PPP projects in Indonesia in the pipeline which you would like to talk about?
So far, as I said, we have 50 projects or PPP projects. 39 of them already financial close. 13 of them already in operation. We have 21 now in pipeline so far. Those 50 projects, I think, covering already 9 different sectors. So that's already in pipeline. And of course, there are already also several kind of proposal, I would say, or for us to be considered now. So what is encouraging is, if you look at the trend, it's quite exponential. So it's not really linear, it's increasing, but in an even higher rate. This is kind of very encouraging, very positive for us. And as I said, there are more and more awareness, there are more and more appetite from, we call it, project owner, both in central government as well as in local government, to seek, to look for this new alternative, the new scheme of PPP. Because in the past, just for information, Indonesia was so much rely on government budget. Almost all infrastructure projects were built by government budget. So now they have alternative, right? Which is very good. However, we know when we're talking about, inviting investor, there are also some implications, consequences, and so forth. We have to work very hard. We have to convince them that the project is really feasible. We have commitment toward this project, that kind of thing. So I think this is a good practice. This is also a good lesson learned. And people, I'm talking about local government, for example, actually other line ministries, they see what others already do or already have done. Hey, why those line ministries have a bigger budget? They can build this project. Oh, because they can invite private sectors. How do they do that? So they are increasingly demand for that, and we see that this is very, very positive. So, however, at the same time, capacity becomes a challenge for us. For both of us in central government, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Planning, for example, in our SMVs as well, and of course, capacity in line ministries, the project owner as well as the local government. So the big homework for us is kind of also how to build capacity.
Thank you very much, Dr. Luki, for that. I would like to thank each and everyone in the audience for being so wonderful this morning. The whole crux of the discussion that we had today is public-private partnership, innovation, and implementation of technology. These are 3 factors which are going to be quintessential when Indonesia would surge ahead with your infrastructure development goals, but very much aligned to the sustainability development agenda. I think it's all about how we convert challenges into opportunities. And I don't think we have to look anywhere else other than Expo 2020, where, the UAE and Dubai government has pulled off a mega event of this scale in the midst of a pandemic. And, we are coming to a very successful closure of this event. So let's all learn from that example, and I really wish good luck to each and every one of you and all the key speakers here in implementing the agendas and the challenges and policy decisions that they spoke about. Thank you very much for being here this morning, and have a very nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Thank you very much, Anjana, and all the speakers for a very insightful discussion that has shown us the commitment and readiness of the people and also the government of Indonesia to engage further in more public-private partnership projects, particularly in sustainable infrastructure. Now, as we have heard from Ibu Sri Mulyani through her keynote speech, we should strive to achieve economic growth as well as social and environmental achievements. And this can be achieved when we cooperate together. Ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the plenary session. Before we move on to the next agenda, which is the business forum, we will take a short break. Please stay tuned. We will be back right at 1 p.m. Dubai time. I'm Timothy Marbun, signing off. Thank you. Aman, thank you.